Hi, welcome back to the Shawl Knitter Unplugged. My name is Sita and I am currently in South Africa, where I am originally from, although I have not lived here for quite a long time. As you know, if you've watched any of my other episodes, I've lived in India for some years. And last week I decided to do something slightly different on my channel, and that is to have what I called a knit and chat. And I got such a great response from the viewers from that episode saying, please tell us more. That was really nice to hear about your journey in India, and I kind of mixed it together with my knitting. So yeah, I'm kind of feeling in the mood for that again. So I'll set out to do that today, and hope you can find this quite interesting as well. And I've decided to call today's episode Patience is Not a Virtue. And that will probably be explained as we go along. I would say patience is a skill, and patience is a necessity, especially when you are living in India or traveling in India. So I am not by nature really a very patient person. I want things to be done now, and I want to get it. If I see it, I want it, and I want to get it, and I want to do it, and I want to have it finished, and that's that. But I think, with age comes a bit of maturity, as well as 12 years of being at the mercy of Mother India. And by that I mean living in such a way where I am not really in control of how I arrive at certain places, how long things take, and when I will arrive at the shop, and if there will be what I'm looking for at the shop. And the chances for irritation and frustration are extremely high. And I guess in the beginning one goes through a lot of that. But ultimately, you just have to laugh at yourself and at life, and realize that things happen as and when they happen. And you can kick and scream and have a little tantrum, but that's not going to change it. So I've discovered the attitude of let's just look at it. We don't know how it's going to work, but it's going to work at some stage, and en route we are probably going to have a very interesting and exciting experience. So I do quite a lot of traveling within India. I travel very locally on local buses, local shared jeeps, and on trains, quite a lot on trains. India is a very large country, and there's a big distance to cross. And the trains are just fascinating. They're really amazing. I normally would travel in what is known as 2AC, which is a second class with air conditioning. There are 5 or 6 different tiers of travel, right from general class to third class to sleeper class, all the way up to first class, which is not really that different from 2AC, so that is what I choose. And I really enjoy these train trips because, they can take anything where when I travel, mostly I travel from the north, and I would go from the northernmost station, and I would travel every year at least for my Christmas holiday to go and stay with my family in Rajasthan. And that would be an overnight train trip. I would probably be on the train from around about 3 p.m. in the afternoon until 11 or 12 o'clock the next day. And that would mean quite a lot of time. And of course, that would mean for me time to knit, time to craft, just time to chill, and I really enjoyed it. Now, I would just love sitting on my bunk, and hopefully I would be able to sit near the window, which I always manage to, and just watch the countryside go by. And it's fascinating what one sees as you're passing through. Lots of agricultural lands, lots and lots and lots of agricultural lands. Every now and again, a camel would appear, or a herd of camels would appear, or there'd be an elephant dragging a tree across a field. But there would generally be lots and lots of colour, especially, and lots of people. There would hardly ever be any time where you would be passing by a landscape that is devoid of humanity. And mostly the people, the women, would be working in the fields. They would be wearing the brightest colours, especially in Rajasthan. Bright, bright orange, cerise pink with mirrors and gorgeous aquas. And I was told by somebody that apart from the fact that they do love colour, they wear very bright colours so that they can actually be seen. When they're out working in the field, there could, for example, in the desert, quite often be a very bad dust storm that can obliterate just about anything. But a bright pop of neon orange would definitely let you know that someone was out there if they needed help, or just the mere fact that someone was out there. So I would sit in the train and I would get out my knitting or my stitching, whatever I was doing, mostly knitting, and watch the world go by, as it were. So when you travel in a train in India, I don't know if many people have traveled on trains anywhere in the world these days. It's quite a rarity. But I think the usual idea one has is of a compartment with, in 2AC, that would mean 4 people. That means 2 bunks on either side, 1, 2, and 1, 2. But that compartment would not have a door. So there'd be a passage running down the one side, and on that passage would be a further 2 bunks. And so the only privacy that one would have would be a curtain that one could pull across the passageway. But mostly the curtains didn't really work, or they didn't close properly, or people were always brushing them open, or people would just come and poke their head in out of curiosity and take a look, or simply move in and sit opposite me and just watch what I was doing. That's not to say people don't knit in India. I mean, women do knit, especially up in the mountains. I think probably in Rajasthan, in the desert, there's not much knitting in evidence because it's never cold. But Indians would be really fascinated by a woman on her own, a non-Indian, traveling very far on her own and knitting. So it would be very entertaining, as mostly they wouldn't really be able to speak English. So how it would generally go is, the train would take off, and somebody would pass by the curtain and notice that I would be sitting there, and they would just simply stop and have a good look me up and down, and then they would carry on. And then in a couple of minutes, they would return with 4 or 5 of their family, or their sister and their auntie and their granny, or the children, and they would squash onto the bunk, the chair next to me or opposite me, and they would talk frantically amongst themselves. Now, at that stage, they didn't know that I could understand quite a lot of Hindi, so I could understand, it was very funny, the things they were saying. Mostly it was around this poor woman who was traveling all alone, and where was her husband, and why was she, and look at that funny needle she's using, and what is she making, and no, that wool is not right. And it was hilarious, absolutely hilarious, but they wouldn't really talk to me. Then, they would maybe get bored and wander off, or somebody else would come, and then somebody would arrive who could speak English, some English. and it would just be their absolute pleasure and their joy to strike up a conversation with me. This could have taken 3 or 4 hours since I got onto the train, but one person would eventually start talking to me. Well, that would be the end of my privacy and just about the end of my knitting, because I would then be involved in long, convoluted sort of conversations about where I came from, how old I was, where my daughter was she married, did she have children, why wasn't I married, why was I in India, and so on and so forth. And it would just be endless stream of conversations, which would also make time pass quite well. Anyway, these trains, it might be a 17 or 18-hour journey, but, invariably it would run a couple of hours late, and we would end up on a station somewhere, and the train would stop, and half the people would get off and go in search of food. But I was never really sure how long the train would stay, so I would just stay put in case the train would go off, and I would be off the train, and nobody could tell me how long the train would stay there. So, yes, I used to do a lot of journeys in that fashion. I would also meet wonderful families who would offer me delicious meals that were brought from home and unpacked from a complete suitcases loaded with parathas and hot pots of rice and curries and sambals and yogurts and chai, and a phenomenal amount of delicious meals were served, and they would always invite me to eat with them, and I mostly did, and the food was absolutely delicious. So I made quite a lot of friends on my train journeys, and yes, and I did quite a lot of knitting. So one of the things that I made, that I happened to find yesterday, that I made on one of my many train journeys. I didn't just make it on one train journey. I remember that I had asked a friend who was coming from South Africa to bring me some wool, because it's very difficult in those days. I didn't know where to find anything besides really acrylic yarn. So she brought me over some African Expressions yarn. I remember I ordered the colors and they came, and I didn't have any patterns, and this was probably around about 2008 or 2009. I wasn't on Ravelry, or I didn't think I knew about Ravelry then, but I definitely knew about knitting. So I proceeded to knit myself a waistcoat out of moss stitch or seed stitch, which is a stitch that I really love, and it turned out really gorgeously. It initially was rather tight once I made it, but I added some panels, and I created this, and I still love it to this day, this really lovely little waistcoat. So this is a multicolor, multi-stripe moss stitch that is just, it looks woven. And I'm a textile designer, so I'm really into the textile element of knitting. And it's really firm. It's a proper waistcoat. So it was a little bit on the tight side, so I knitted up a couple of panels, which I stitched in on either side. They didn't really match, but that didn't matter. I stitched them in on the inside and made sure that the garment fit. And then I just did a simple slip stitch crochet border around the neck and down the front with a couple of loops, and added these sweet little wooden buttons that I managed to pick up. And this I knitted over many, many, many train trips, quite a few train trips. It's not something that grows extremely fast. Look how beautiful the wrong side of it is. I really love this. It's gorgeous. And it's pure 100% wool from African Expressions, and it has kept me warm on many of my journeys. So that was one very memorable garment that I knitted on the train. When I moved up to the mountains, I found the need for a hot water bottle. So I knitted this hot water bottle cover, also on the train many years ago. I think it's quite pilly now because I use it every single night when it's cold. And this was just a design, a rib design that I added some cables to, and it served me very well. I think I've had this for close on 10 years. So I discovered that I would need quite a lot of patience traveling around in India, because not only did I travel on, on a train, but I would need to, for example, if I was going up to the mountains, to the temples, I would need to take a bus. And this would be, a large old bus, a public bus that would travel every day, or there might be, I don't know how many, and there would be no timetable. So I would have to walk up to the main road, sort of in the area where buses may or may not stop, because, there was never really a bus stop per se, and wait. So it would mean waiting on the side of the road until the bus came along. And perhaps the first bus would be full. There would be nowhere to sit, and that would also mean there would be nowhere to stand, that the people standing were already sort of pouring out of the open door. And sometimes they would still stop and insist that you squeeze yourself in. And if I had run out of patience, I would squeeze myself in and probably end up sitting on top of this really hot engine cover next to the driver and saying a lot of prayers as we traveled along the roads. Now, I have to take my hat off to the bus drivers in India. They are incredible, especially up in the mountains. The roads are quite wild. I'm sure you've all seen on Instagram or, I don't know, YouTube clips of these buses rumbling along next to thousands of meters drop down into a ravine where there's a river somewhere way down there. And I have experienced that. And in those instances, I try to keep my eyes closed and pray. And we always make it. We always make it. There are often very interesting road signs. These are things that I also love in India, are the road signs. And the one that often would appear would be, what would they call it? They would say, landslide conditions ahead. Proceed with caution. So I don't know what proceed with caution means. Nobody ever slowed down. I mean, they would go. And sometimes there would actually be a landslide. So that's it. There's a landslide. You cannot go any further. All the traffic is backed up. Now everybody stops. The buses stop. The cars stop. The taxis stop. Depending on how long ago the landslide happened, there would already be some little fires on the go on the side of the road. People making chai. People have got out their vehicles. All the men have gone up to the landslide to give their opinion as to how one could fix it or get through. Somebody apparently somehow has called the nearest road working crew, and eventually, maybe some hours, a grader will appear. By that time, half the vehicles might have turned around and decided to go back. The other half of the people would have set up camp and have started cooking food on the side of the road, or simply gone to sleep in their vehicles. And there would be just a hullabaloo of everybody milling around and trying to work out how we're going to move on. Anyway, the grader would come, they would move a few rocks. It would be terribly dangerous. Everybody would be sitting in their car, revving, waiting for the moment that a vehicle could squeeze past. And that's what we do. In those situations, I would actually prefer to walk over to the other side and wait until my bus or transport mode would come. So again, I would have to be very patient. And this was, this was just how it went on everywhere in life in India. It was the same thing when one had to go shopping for your groceries. I lived on the side of a mountain, and I always had to walk up to the road. So this was, exercise was in every instance of my life, to walk straight up this mountain, up to the road, where there was a little chai shop, and then I would wait for what is known as a share jeep, a share taxi, to go the 8 or 9 kilometers down to the village to go and shop. Now, sometimes I would walk down, and while I was walking, a jeep would come past, and I'd jump on. Sometimes a jeep would not come past, and I would just walk the whole way. So you'd get up and you'd sit down, have a cup of chai, and maybe a bus would come, maybe a bus wouldn't come. Maybe if no bus came, you would have your cup of chai, and you'd just go back home. Try again tomorrow, Anyway, mostly I managed to get into the village, and then I would have my little list of things that I needed to get. Now, I did learn very soon that if one achieved one or maybe two of those items on your shopping list, if you managed to actually purchase them, that would be a miracle. And you would be so happy that it would just be a total joy. You would be happy to go home minus the other 8 things that you tried to get 2 days ago and were told to come back in 2 days' time and still were not available. So in those cases, what I would do is, if I could not really find much of the items I needed in town, I would go to a lovely little local dabba, which is a local eating house, and I would have my knitting or my stitching, and I would order my food, which would be just delicious home cooked fare for nothing, for absolutely nothing. Sometimes it was just an excuse. Just let's go into town to eat some divine food that I didn't have to make myself. And you could sit there and you could hang out there all day. People would come in and out. The family who were doing the cooking were very happy that a foreigner would be interested in eating their food. They would be very interested in the work that I would be doing. And I would often be doing some stitching work. Apart from my knitting, I would be stitching these little bags, which are traditionally called jholi. And I think I might have showed you this once before, but this is a phenomenal process, and it's actually taught as a spiritual process, as a way of saying your mantras with every stitch. Now, I don't know, I think you might be able to see the detail of this. So this is all completely hand stitched. The bag is hand stitched together, the loop is hand stitched, the borders, which are very, 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 very hard, are hand stitched. And I used to teach this technique. So I used to run workshops, and in the workshops we would make a little bag, and it has some pockets inside, and it's lined with, this is lined with shwe fabric. And traditionally these bags also have little secret pockets, tiny little secret pockets, which sometimes are so secret that you can't find them yourself. And then you'd make these lovely little, tiny little multicolored pom-poms, and you'd decorate them. So this is a little bag that is worn by a sadhu. A sadhu is a sage, a Hindu sage, and I am an initiated sadhu, and this is sort of part of what we have to do in order to say our prayer, our mantra. So you can imagine how overjoyed and surprised I was to discover that this could actually be my work. This could actually be part of a wonderful spiritual process, colorful, useful, and just gorgeous. So this little bag would actually be worn under your arm, under your armpit like this. So it's very firm. It's not a floppy thing. It's made on 4, 5, or 6 layers of fabric. So there are bigger ones, but this would hold all your, your passport, your money, your safe things, your keys, and it would sit. You don't have to touch it at all. It's quite like a box. It's quite firm. So it sits under your arm, and that's it. You can then wear your shawl or your jacket or whatever it is you're going to wear is totally hidden. It's not seen. It's safe, and you're hands-free. I love these bags. I really do. I have such a passion for them. And for quite a few years, I made them and I sold them, but they are really months and months of work. So these are stitched onto velvet. So the gold or the yellow that you can see is velvet, and everything else is the stitch. So you can see here too, it is all hand stitched. And another secret part of this work is that you actually make your thread. You take 2 strands of single thread and you hook it on a hook, and you ply it, and it becomes really strong, so strong that it's impossible to break it. And then you stitch it with a very big needle that's on a leader cotton. It's an incredible process, and it's very ancient. So this is actually not a tradition, not a tribal craft. This is a spiritual craft. So, and this is called the jholi, Jholi. And yeah, I would find these gorgeous little plastic beads or buttons and various things. Oh, and this has got a little crocheted pouch that a friend made for me that has a crystal in it, that I keep it in my bag. So these are the things that have taught me and given me the patience that I have developed and come to love. The patience and the art of taking one's time and getting to where you're going when you get there, and making good use of the time in between. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. On my journey that I am offering next year, the first one that's coming up, Mystic India journey, we will be doing some train travel. We will be doing a couple of overnight journeys, probably not too much bus travel, but yeah, we will get to experience the joy of watching the world, the beautiful endless landscapes, varying landscapes, the desert, the ancient temples that sit in the middle of fields, the gorgeous women in their bright colors drifting across the landscape, and we can just sit back and watch that all go by. But what I do recommend is that you bring some window cleaning materials with you, is what I've learned. Now, this obviously people think I'm totally crazy, but before I get on the train, once I have worked out where my seat is, I go to the outside and I wash the window, and then I come to my spot, and it's normally a double glass, and I wash the inside of the window. So that A, I can see the view, and B, if I want to take pictures, I can do so. So these are the things that I've learned to make my life more fun and slow down my pace and allow myself to accept that life is how it is. And no matter how much we try to speed things up or slow things down, there is a natural pace in the universe, and it's always better if we just go with it. So I hope you have enjoyed this little chat today, and I will be back with some more real proper knitting stuff, but I'm going to entertain you for a while with my little journeys, and just remember that patience is not a virtue. It's a lesson. It's a lesson, and it's a choice. So take care, enjoy the rest of your week, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for visiting. Namaste.